Obviously I've brought Herbie, the famous Herbie, which you would know from the program. He has over time, like Alan and myself, he's slowly deteriorating. He's wearing out, not rusting out, because he does get a fair bit of use. So I'll be using Herbie tonight to go through some concepts. And we've all been in the fitness profession, whether you've been on a professional basis or whether you've just been in it as a participant. And these days with social media and YouTube and Facebook, you get exposed to a bazillion more things that I got exposed to when I was first in the profession. When I was first in the profession, we didn't have the internet. All you got was maybe magazines, Muscle and Fiction, commonly known as Muscle and Fitness, and the bodybuilding magazine. So you get ideas or see concepts that you read about in magazines. Fitness wasn't really a big thing in the 70s and 80s, particularly in the area of strength training. Aerobics started to come into fashion in the 70s and 80s. But the gym itself was very much left to the men and the bodybuilders who wanted to build muscle, and they followed Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. So a lot of the exercises back then, they were more simple. Doesn't mean they were good or bad, but they were simple. But this day and age, we are daily exposed to a plethora of different exercises that are pushed out by the social influencers who want to put their name onto something and try to promote, hey, this is the best exercise, I'm the expert, follow me, I'm the guru, I'll give you all your solutions to training and fitness. And what I want you to do as an exercise professional is to be able to look at everything with an open mind rather than blindly follow someone's reputation or the fashion or the trend or what everyone else is doing. And I regularly get people ask me, or graduates say, what do you think of this exercise? Some people swear by it. And yes, every exercise that's been invented or created, particularly the people who are doing it or the people who invented it, they will swear by it, they'll be passionate about it, and you can get wrapped up in that emotion of, wow, everyone's doing it, and it's the in thing, and everyone's, the herd mentality, everyone's doing it, so it must be right. Well, I learned something a long time ago, 5 million people doing a dumb thing doesn't mean it's not a dumb thing. And in this day and age, you can actually say 5 billion people doing a dumb thing doesn't mean it's not a dumb thing. So because everyone else is doing it, doesn't mean it's right. And my goal for tonight is to help you question everything and see things for what they are, not what people say they are. To cut through all the emotion, all the bells and whistles, all the smokes and mirrors, and all the social gatherings, and be able to cut through it all and see for what it really is. There's a saying which I adapted a long time ago: the numbers tell the story doesn't tell the numbers. And what that basically means is, I don't believe what the story is, I don't believe what people say. I try to go through what they say and see the numbers, the anatomy, the science, the proof, the evidence, not what someone else says about something. And in this day and age, with the media, social media, everything is tainted. Everything is tainted towards the biasness of whoever that is, whether it be the individual person delivering it or the organisation delivering it. And I'm sure you're wise enough to know that everyone has some form of vested interest, whether it be self-serving their ego, or a financial serving, or to try to be the leader, or to add on to their social gathering, and I've got all these people following me, aren't I important, whatever it might be. I want you to remove yourself from that and step back and see things from what I call a third place. The third place is a logical place, an analytical place, and an emotional place. And that's important, that when you make decisions, you don't make decisions on short-term emotion. Never make long-term decisions on short-term emotion. Never make short-term statements based on emotion, because you'll probably have to end up saying sorry, or you end up with egg on your face later down the track when you realise how silly that actually was, because you got wrapped up in the moment. I don't want you to be in the moment. As an exercise professional, from an integrity point of view, what's really important for me anyway, is to seek the truth. Not seek the fashion, not seek the trend, not to be accepted by the misguided many. I'd rather have the truth and stand on a firm platform of integrity, so when I say something, I can justify it from an anatomical, physiological, biomechanical point of view, or a numbers point of view. And many times a lot of people are saying lots of things about lots of things in the world, and they're not necessarily based on the real numbers. They're based on the numbers that they want to put forth because they have a vested interest, or they're saying because they just believe in that and they have a conviction in that, whether it be that exercise. And I want you to step out of that, because that's a little bit embarrassing place to be, particularly when you have wiser people looking in and go, well, look at that little emotional person getting all upset, or self-justifying, or defending their opinion. And many times you can defend your opinion and you may be defending the wrong ground. And I've done that many times in my journey, where I did exercises. I was an avid bodybuilder in my younger days. I know I may not look like it, but back when I was in my 20s, I was quite a significant mammal, and I lifted very heavy weights, and I got very, very big. And therefore, the bigger I got, the more I got emotionally connected to what I was doing, as that was the way to do it. That's the Kman way, that is the only way. And ended up with eating my words later on when I look back on that and said, well, that was a way, but it wasn't necessarily the best way. It was a way, but it wasn't the best way. So I want you as an exercise professional to be able to seek the best, the safest, the most effective, the most time-efficient way to look after your clients, and also look after yourself. And I'm going to give you a process of how to analyse exercise programs, how to analyse exercises. And some of you will remember this from the program, some of you may not be up to that in the program, some of you have forgotten it, some of you may have skipped that session and thought, well, I already know that anyway. Well, that's an interesting concept in itself. I already know that anyway. Well, you may know your way of that, but you may not know all the ways of that. So I have these questions, and you can tell how smart someone is by the statements that they make, and you can tell how wise someone is by the questions that someone asks. And I want you to become a questioner. Question everything. And a good starting point is question your current beliefs, and question your current convictions, and question your current opinions. That might be a good starting point, because you've already taken ownership of that opinion, or ownership of that belief or conviction. You don't question it, because you think that's just the way it is. And you love when people say, hey, what do you think about this? And you can't wait to give the answer, because you come across as the expert and you want to share the wisdom and your version of the truth with the world, but you never actually question your own truth. And you may need to backpedal and say, well, this is how I've been doing it up until now. And yes, it works to a certain extent, but is that the best way? Or is there a better way? Or is there a safer way of doing things? And we're always going to be exposed to massive amounts of new exercises. And whether that be exercises, or whether that be diets. I've been 37 years and I've seen all of these diets come and go, and I've seen different exercises, trends come and go. And a lot of the things that's happening in the profession today with what they call functional exercises was deemed, even back when I went to university, it was deemed, and that was back in the 90s, those movements were deemed outright dangerous in the 80s. From an anatomical point of view, I always remember going to my first lecture of anatomy with my lecturer called Dr. Bronx, and a very, very smart man. And I was from the gym, I was buffed, and he went into the first lecture, and I think he shook us up a bit, and he went through all these different exercises, and he just ripped them all apart from an anatomical and a safety point of view. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, I do all these exercises, but I didn't have a leg to stand on, because he knew his anatomy, and I just got them out of the magazine Muscle and Fiction, and I got them out of Arnold Schwarzenegger does it and it must be right, where he just looked at it and just cut them all apart from an anatomical point of view. And I started thinking, wow, I've just been exposed in a slap in the face way, because my ego was hurt internally, because I believed in them and I was the biggest gym instructor in the gym. And all of a sudden I was exposed to this whole new world of anatomy. But a lot of those exercises that were deemed dangerous, we took them out in the 90s, and now in 2020s they've all re-emerged, but they're called different things. The things back then that we found were ineffective are now called things as a part of different programs, and there's lots of programs around, and there's CrossFit and there's Pilates and there's yoga and there's TRX and there's all these things over here. But a lot of those things there were deemed actually anatomically ineffective and sometimes just anatomically unsafe. But because we put a new wrapping on it, because we created a new brand, because we created a new emotion, a new mojo, a new gift wrap, bells and whistles, all of a sudden, wow, this is a great thing. But when you look at those things and you draw them out, you look at the application of them to maybe in the workplace, in the area of workplace health and safety, a lot of those movement patterns would be deemed unsafe in the workplace from the workplace health and safety officer. Because they're not emotionally attached to the exercises, but in the gym they're okay, but here they're dangerous and here they're dangerous. But over here, because they're being rebranded. So I don't want you to be easily misled down someone else's garden path for whatever vested interest they have. I want you to stand back first and go, okay, let me analyse this before I make any decision, and that decision is going to be based on an informed decision, based on numbers, based on proof, based on common sense, based on anatomy, physiology, macro and micronutrition. But first of all, you actually have to know all of those, be able to analyse those, and that's what you're here today to do. So let me go through the questions that I always ask when I come across a new exercise, and I come across them every day. You just got to go on YouTube and just look at different exercises and some of the crazy stuff people are doing. And sometimes the people who are doing them seem to have high credibility. They have a great body, they've got six packs and big biceps, or tight butts and firm thighs, or they might be Mr. this or Miss that, or a professional body shaper, or they might be an elite athlete. And many times they're highly educated, and they have degrees or they're doctors. And one thing I'm going to share with you is never be intimidated by someone's reputation or someone's title. And the thing I think Einstein put it beautifully is imagination is far more important than education. And it took me a while when I first heard that quote to really understand it. But as I mature, I'm understanding it more and more, because the challenge with education is very defining. You're being taught what other people are teaching you, so that is actually limited. Imagination is limitless. Education puts you in a box. This is what you have to know, this is the test. And a lot of the time people, when they get educated, they don't really they don't use your imagination to explore it, to expand it and to understand it. All they do is repeat it. So when someone says, well, what about this? And he says, you do this, because that's how you've been educated. So yes, education is important as long as you don't lose your imagination, and as long as it doesn't define you. And in this day and age, this doctor says do this, and this doctor says don't do that, that will kill you, and this doctor says don't do that, that will kill you. So everything is very conflicting, whether it be not just in the exercise profession, but even in what we're going through now in the pandemic. Everyone's panicking, but who you listen to, they're all conflicting. There are people who say this, and there's people who say that, and they're very much conflicting. There's different countries who are approaching it completely different. If you look at, I just looked today, Vietnam, for example, has no cases of deaths, and they've never closed down. Brazil's just opened up. New Zealand's closed down. So I'm not saying which is right or wrong, but what I want you to understand is don't just believe one. Go and explore and work it out for yourself. Go and explore your anatomy and work out the exercises. Someone will say, this is the better exercise, or that's better for fat burning, that's good for functional strength. I want you to start to question everything, not just exercise, because I think questioning is an attitude, it's a philosophy, it's one of those things you carry forward where you're going to work out your own answers in business, in fitness, in the world, in politics, in climate change, in what's going around at the moment. So I'm trying to urge you to think for yourself, and at least then you can stand firm and you've made up your own mind, not just blindly follow a concept or a philosophy because you're one of the sheeple who does that. And you're going to find, you're going to be expose yourself to criticism from the sheeple, but that's okay. That gets you really thinking about why you're doing it and what you're doing. So if you come across an exercise program, or if you look at an exercise, and I'm going to go through certain exercises, ones which are fashionable in this day and age, and other ones that are traditional but are still being done today. And I'm going to go through them and break them down purely from an unemotional point of view. Now, understand most of these exercises that I may rip apart and they may come out good, bad or ugly. Understand, I come from a place where I've done virtually every stupid exercise you know to man. If you go to Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, I've done them all. And I've done them all ferociously and passionately and sincerely. And if someone asks me, does that work? And I would be passionately, sincerely, and I say, yes, it does. But what I now know, I was passionately, sincerely wrong. And people can be very passionate and they can be very sincere, but they can be very passionately, sincerely wrong. Now, they believe they're right because their emotions glued themselves to that concept, and they believe so much so, and it's a conviction, so much a religious conviction. Look at the differences in religions in the world, and they all passionately believe that they're the chosen one. You may on the outside go, well, that really looks really silly what they're doing, but they believe it, and they do it, and they live it, and they breathe it. And exercise and nutrition is almost religion. Everyone has an opinion on nutrition. It's quite amazing how people they lose about 20 kilos, and all of a sudden they think they've got a PhD in micronutrition, and they think they know everything about nutrition. And if I ask them, okay, well, that's fantastic. So what's the molecular structure of fat? And they wouldn't have a clue what it is. So they talk about fat as they're an expert, but they don't even know what fat's made up of. And if they say, hey, they're an exercise specialist now in core conditioning and working the core, and if I say, okay, we'll name at least 7 muscles that make up their core, their origin, insertion, their function, their action, and they wouldn't have a clue. They can't even do one. So I don't want you to be that person who can come across to a highly wise, educated person as an emotional idiot with a high opinion that comes from a very low place. I want you to always work on your building blocks so when you do give an opinion, you can actually justify it in a logical, sequential way using concepts of anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, whatever it might be, and wrapped with a lot of common sense. So here's the first question when you come across an exercise. The first question is the obvious question, is why? Why? What is the goal of that exercise? And it might be a person asking you about this exercise and says, well, what's your goal? And if it's an exercise by itself, it says, why are we doing that? What is the purpose of it? Yes, you can easily confuse activity with productivity. I could go over there and do a handstand in the corner and spin my head around and say, isn't that a great exercise? But the question is, why? Why am I doing that? What is the purpose of it? So first question is a simple one, and I'm going to wrap it with a lot of common sense. Why do you want to do that exercise? What is your goal, and what do you want to get out of that exercise? And then I want you to step back and look at the why and look at the exercise from an outside point of view, as if you've never seen it before, as if you don't know how many people is doing it. It's completely foreign to you, and you look at it and what would you think? Would you go, what are they doing? Or isn't that weird? Or that looks crazy? Or wow, that looks painful? Or that looks like it's going to hurt someone? Or that looks silly? Because generally, if it looks silly, it probably is, and you're using what I call your common sense. And if it doesn't make common sense, it's probably nonsense. But I understand common sense is not very common these days. However, if you're emotionally invested, emotionally attached, emotionally driven, and you'll be doing that exercise, or your clan or your tribe do it, they all run the banter of how awesome this is, you're not going to use common sense. That goes out the window. You're just going to be wrapped up in the emotion and blindly follow and make have a high opinion or a strong opinion about that without using common sense. So I guess as an exercise professional, one thing I've learned is to remove myself from the pot of emotion and ask, why are they doing that? And just don't blindly follow. and use your common sense. I remember when I was, many years ago, I was over in Ireland, and I took my father over there. We travelled around Ireland because he's Irish. And I was driving towards the west coast of Ireland, and I wanted to go to Killarney, which is south, and I came to the west coast. And I'm following the signs to get to Killarney because we're going all around and we want to go and see the Ring of Kerry, which is a pretty cool place because it's named after me. Well, not really, but it has the same name. And I came to the coast where the ocean was there, and there was a sign, and it had Killarney, and it was pointing to the right. And I said, oh, the Killarney's to the right. And straight away I thought, that doesn't make any sense. The sign says right. But if I'm facing west and I'm on the west coast and the ocean is in front of me, I'm in the northern hemisphere, then south cannot be right. South has to be left. That's just geographical common sense and geographical fact. So the sign said right, but the geographics, the proof says left. And I remember Rose said, well, Killarney's right. And I said, no, it can't be right. It has to be left, because if it's south of Ireland, it can't be right on the west coast turning right. And so I'm ignoring the sign, and I'm going, I'm trusting the geographics of south. Unless someone's changed the globe where the location of Ireland is or where Killarney is, I'm going south. I'm just wondering how many people turned right to go to Killarney and ended up completely on the other end of the country. And it was later on that night I was reading a brochure in Ireland, and one of the little tips about travelling around Ireland is be wary about the signs, because the kids get up and change the sign direction for fun, just to have, take the fun out of the tourists. So there's a classic example, is that got to question everything. If that doesn't make sense, if that exercise, and they say that exercises burn fat, then it doesn't look like a real fat burning exercise. If they say that exercise is great for sports conditioning, well, wait a minute, it's really weird looking. That doesn't make any sense. So the goal might be to burn fat, or to get fit, or to build muscle, or be sports specific. And what I'm just saying is use your common sense and says, does it just look right, or does it just look a bit weird or a little bit silly? And I think if you remove the emotion, 99, if not 99.9 times out of 100, you probably come up with the right conclusion if you remove the emotion. Because if it looks stupid, it probably is, and if it looks silly, it probably is, and if it looks like it's not going to do anything, it probably does, and if it looks like it's going to hurt you, it probably does. And I think a lot of people don't trust their gut instinct and their common sense. They just blindly follow and validate it because everyone else is doing it, then it's right. So that's a real simple question, but I don't think a lot of people, they just blindly follow. They just follow the guy with the biggest bicep, or the person who is the biggest social influencer, or the person with the more letters after the name, or the person who is the cool kid of the crowd. So there's number one. It's a common sense one, but again, common sense is not all that common. But I want you to not just apply this to exercise, but use your common sense with everything. Don't believe anything that people tell you. I want you to dig deep and question it until you can form your own informed opinion based on proof that you can easily justify, not from emotion, but purely as close as the facts as you can possibly get. Now, the second question when you come across this exercise, I think is the most, one of the most important ones, if not the most important one, and I'm sure Alan will agree with this one, is it safe? The number one rule as an exercise professional is I would not hurt my client. Is it safe? And that's the number one rule, which is when people come to us to lose weight, tone up, get into shape, get rehabilitated, improve sports conditioning, in that is not, I want you to hurt me and injure me. So it's a really big responsibility that we have as exercise professionals, because exercises, yes, they can produce results, but they can also have side effects. You can train muscles to be stronger, but you can also hurt joints in the process. So safety is a really important thing, and I'll cover a few examples as we get into it. But when it comes to exercise or training or weight training, I always put my X-ray goggles on. I get my X-ray goggles, because most people, when they look at exercise, they look from the outside in. I always look from the inside out. So I don't look at the muscles first. Most people look at the muscles or the fat. What's it doing to the fat? And what's it doing to the muscles? And wow, he does. Look at the movement. Isn't it impressive? It's quite amazing. That's really cool. Well, I'll look from the inside out. The first thing I'll look at is what is it doing to the skeletal system. So I will look at someone and I will virtually take everything off, and this is what I will see. And I'll see what is that movement doing to Herbie. What is it doing to the joint? What's it doing to the two adjoining surfaces? What's it doing to the cartilage? What's it doing to the menisci in the knee? What's it doing to the bones or the architecture of the joint? What's it doing to the ligaments that hold the joint in place? What's it doing to the burses? What's it doing to the capsule? What is it doing to the tendons? And then the last thing I look at, so I go from the in and then I go out to the muscle belly. I don't go, most people go to the muscle belly and they don't go as far as that. They just go, this is good for biceps, and that's it. They don't even consider what it's doing to the tendons, considering the main injury in bicep is bicep tendonitis, or long-headed bicep tendonitis up here, or they had bicep tendonitis down here in the insertion point, or the origin point up in the long head. They look at what's it doing to the bicep. They don't look at what's it doing to the tendon, what's it doing to the joints, what's it doing to the deeper tendons, such as in here, your supraspinatus, or what's it doing to the patella, or the underlying surface of the patella as it goes across the knee. So look from the outside in, and then you will say, okay, is it causing any detrimental effect, wear and tear on the joints? Because when the joints or the tendons or the burses or the cartilage or the menisci, when they all flare up, and now you've got things such as osteoarthritis that can lead to rheumatoid arthritis, bursitis, capsulitis, tendonitis, tendinopathy. They are the injuries that people like Alan and myself have to deal with as we get older. I have no challenge with my belly of my bicep. My bicep belly, to this day, as you can tell, is fantastic. But I've got tendonitis in both tendons of my bicep. I have shoulder impingement of my supraspinatus tendon in my shoulder. I have medial epicondylitis on my right. I have lateral epicondylitis on my left, and that's just looking at the shoulders. And I get a subluxed right shoulder joint. I get impingement on the left shoulder joint. So my point being, none of those are muscular. They're all more tendons, ligaments. This one's subluxed because the ligaments are completely subluxed and overstretched, not to mention the joints. When I use my shoulders, I feel the grindiness is like sandpaper in the joints. And that's from just wear and tear. Now if you're young, you don't know what you're doing to the joints until it's too late. So an exercise professional, when you look at an exercise, is what's it doing to the joints? Now, common movements to be wary of is the body's designed biomechanically in its anatomical position to withstand certain forces and designed to do certain things. And certain things are more for weight bearing, certain things are for lifting heavy weight, and certain things are for more reaching and acceleration. So generally speaking, anything through the center here is pretty well designed, for as developing a good stable base, what people call your core. The further you go out from the axial system to more the appendicular system, the less it's designed for heavy loaded type movement patterns. For example, the appendicular system, which is the girdle and your limbs, that's basically designed for reach and acceleration of lighter loads, for hunting gathering, throwing stones at a lizard because I want to eat it that night on the fire, or throwing spears, but it's not designed for heavy loaded type movements. It's designed for acceleration and speed in the limbs and reach in the limbs. Same with the legs, because they're long levers. They're called long bones for a reason, for reach, and that can get that acceleration. So they're not necessarily designed to have heavy loads at the end of them going through, like in throwing stones or whatever it might be. Which is interesting when you look at exercises. A lot of people will be swinging weights and all sorts of stuff on a joint that is not designed for that, because These limbs are what we call, if you remember in your class levers, they're what we call third class levers. So third class levers are more designed for acceleration at the end of the limb and reach. They're not designed for heavy lifting loads. The ones that are designed for more heavy lifting loads are more the first class and second class. You know, second class is your calf, for example. You can lift a fair bit of weight, you know, because it's more of a weight-bearing lever, you know, through the body. Where these are third class. All right, this is third class movement. Third class is that the load is here, the force or the your muscle force is here, because that's the insertion of, say, your deltoid, and the axis of rotation here. So the axis is here, or the fulcrum. There is the force generated by the muscle, and there's the resistance. So you find that type of movement pattern will create a fair bit of stress across the shoulder joint or the axis system, because it's not designed for a heavy load at the end of the lever. It's designed for light load at the end of the lever with acceleration, or just to reach and pull things in. So it's interesting just looking at, when you look at first, second, third class levers, of how they're designed for different functions in the body. So other movements to be wary of is anything, the body's designed, the joints are designed for compression forces, so they're good at handling compression. You know, compression forces going through my center line. They're good at handling traction. Compression is the joints push together, or the joints pull apart, which is called traction. Right? Because they're equally, like the vertebral column is nicely designed for compression, so the force is equally distributed through each vertebrae, through the intervertebral disc, and it's designed to be able to, as long as it's in its good posture, biomechanical position, it can handle a fair bit of compression forces and traction forces. It's like a tyre on a car. If you have your car tyre with the tread, and you put weight on top of the tyre, then it can handle that okay. It just equally just spreads the force throughout the tyre, and even if you're driving forward in a straight line, you know, that's compression forces. And if you go over a bump, it will go into traction. Now the other two types of forces to be wary of is what we call shearing forces. So compressions, they push down together. If you put your hands like this and you push together, that's called compression forces. So if you push your hands together, you're not going to hurt yourself. If you pull your hands apart, pull apart, that's called traction. So tyres and joints are good for that. Now what we've got next is a shearing force. If I get your hand and you put your hands like this and you rub it like this, like when you're cold, and you rub it hard and you keep rubbing and keep rubbing and keep rubbing, you're going to find there's going to be friction, you're going to find there's going to be heat, and if you keep doing that, you're going to actually start wearing your skin out. It's like the sandpaper effect. If I want to wear out the layer of wood, I get sandpaper. I don't push the sandpaper into the wood. I don't pull the sandpaper off the wood. I push it across and back across the wood, and that will wear the wood down. So that's what we call shearing forces. So shearing forces across joints will cause wear and tear on those joints. So a lot of loaded positions, such as these type movements or long lever movements, third class lever movements, they will over time, particularly if you load them up, will have create greater shearing forces through those joints. So shearing forces, it's not that the joints can't handle it. Of course they can handle it with light loads, but if you start applying heavy loads repetitively, week in, week out, you're going to wear that out. If I get my car and I start driving it around a roundabout and I start doing donuts at high speeds with all the resistance going across the tread of the tyre, that tread's going to wear out and your joint will wear out like the tyre. Now the tyre I can easily replace, a joint not so easy. So shearing forces, and then you also have rotation forces. So if I get my hand and I rotate, again, these joints are okay for rotation, but they're not okay if you load them up and you rotate them repetitively, regularly and frequently, then you're going to find you're just accelerating the wear and tear of that particular joint. Particularly if the movement is not necessary, if it's just a trendy exercise or what someone's doing in the gym, and yeah, it may be working the muscle, but what's it doing to the joint? And a lot of these exercises work the muscle while they wear out the joints. But you don't know the joints are wearing out, because when you're young, your joints will feel like rubber. But when you get old, those joints will soon dehydrate, they'll start to crack, they'll wear and tear, and before you know it, you've got rusty joints, rusty sandpapery joints, and you can't get that back because these things don't regenerate. Bones don't regenerate anything like muscles. Muscles has high blood supply, they'll regenerate. Cartilage and ligaments and bone and meniscus, they don't regenerate. Ligament doesn't regenerate. So you've got to be very careful, particularly when you have healthy joints. If you want to keep them healthy, you have to be a visionary, looking at your crystal ball and say, well, this exercise, yes, this might be burning energy, it might be burning fat, it might be building muscle, it might be working the muscle, but what's it doing to the joint? Because if once that joint goes, you're not going to be working those muscles anyway. Once your tyre is completely worn out, the axle is worn out, it's not just the tread, but actually the axle, then that car's going nowhere. You may have a fantastic engine, but you can't take it anywhere because everything else, the axle and the tyres, are all already broken, the tread's worn out. So this is really important because exercise can be the best thing you can do. However, it can over time, if you don't do it right, in the right dosage, with the right biomechanical movement, and the right frequency, in the right way, it can actually have a detrimental effect. So those, and then you also have long levers. Any long lever, which is a third class lever as I discussed, with a load at the end of the lever, that's going to be a challenge as well by putting forces through, what we call inertial forces through the joints, through a third class lever. If you add a weight and then you start accelerating that, then it's like me going around a corner faster in my car doing a burnout. If I go around slow versus going around fast, which would wear out the joint? Slow or fast? Well, the faster I go, the more wear on the tread. So the faster I start swinging weights, the more momentum, the more lack of control, the more stress, the more wear and tear. So these are just some general concepts I want you to look at movements and say, okay, that is a movement pattern that is not, it's not in sync for a healthy joint. If you keep doing that, then that could lead to some joint abnormalities and challenges and injuries, and eventually you'll just be worn down, and then you may be getting operations and all sorts of stuff. So safety is vital, and I'll cover that as we go through the safety in joints. You also have to look at safety in the vertebral column, because the main areas of injury in the lower back are L4, L5, which is safety in the intervertebral disc. So compression forces. If I start bending, then, and that's okay, the body is designed to bend, but then you're going to get anterior compression forces on the intervertebral disc, on the L4, L5. That pushes the disc toward the back, and as you know, the disc is made up of your annulus fibrosus, which is the outer fibrous outer lining, and the nucleus pulposus, which is the inside part. And if you start to bend forward and you start swinging weights with load, then you're actually going to start to wear and tear the intervertebral disc, and that will push the nucleus pulposus towards the back. The annulus fibrosus will start to dehydrate and crack, and before you know it, the nucleus, the annulus is actually going through those cracks, and it leads to a bulging disc, a herniated disc, a slipped disc, and all of a sudden you've got lower back challenge. And lower back is a really significant area to be wary of, and you don't want to be contributing to that. In the shoulder, it's probably more shoulder impingement, tendonitis in the shoulders. And then you have the knee, which is more obviously Patellofemoral Syndrome, which we'll cover that with certain exercises where the patella glides across the in the groove between the two condyles, the intercondylar groove of the femur. And there's certain exercises you've got to be wary of that. And obviously in the hip, you've got wear and tear of the hip, because that can be quite sensitive, particularly over time. So safety is the next question. The next question is, that's two questions. The third one is function. Is it functional, or is it applicable, or is it specific to what the person wants? A lot of people throw out the word function, but when you have a look at the exercises that a lot of people do, which they call functional exercise, they look as much as functional as me trying to imitate a frog. And you say, well, that's a functional exercise. Well, it might be if I'm a frog, or it might be if I'm a lizard, or it might be if I'm a bat hanging from the ceiling, it might be if I'm Tarzan swinging from ropes, and it might be if I'm a seal performing seal, balancing myself on big balls. So we tend to use all these exterior and movements and positions, and we say they're functional, they're good for the core, But when you look at it from the outside, you go, what part of life do I do that? Or what part of my sport do I do that? When do I put my body in that position? And when do I create that pose? And when do I do that movement? And how is that related to what I want in my general daily life? And if you ask those questions and you ask them honestly, you come up with the right answers. What people don't do is they don't ask themselves questions. They just go, yes, that's a functional exercise. I did it. It's really, I can really feel it. But you're just feeling the wrong thing in the wrong exercise in the wrong position, in striking the wrong body parts. So yeah, there's lots of stuff that people do, and they put themselves in really awkward positions, and they label it function or specific or core, whatever it might be. And I just want you to ask that question. If it's functional, how does that relate? Where's the transference? Does it replicate in some way or form the body position, the joint action, and the movement speed of what I want? And the closer it is to that, the greater transference. The less close to that, the less the transference. So function or specific is another great question. The next one is there a benefit? Now, some people say, something's better than nothing. Well, in most cases, that's probably the case. But is it, if I say this is burning fat, and I get you laying on the ground doing crunches, well, from a common sense point of view, do crunches burn fat? Well, I don't think you need to be a physiologist to work out that crunches don't really burn fat, because you're not really expending much energy. You're doing the exercise laying on the ground. And so is there a benefit to it? No. So that's probably really a waste of time exercise, because it's not providing the benefit that you want. On the other hand, there are certain exercises that will provide a benefit. Say if I do a leg extension, for example, which is one of the machines in gyms where you sit on that seat and you put a load at the end of the lever, and I do leg extension, and I get, does it provide a benefit? Well, is my benefit to build muscle? Yes, well, that would provide a benefit for my quadricep, because it loads up the muscle with an appropriate load, and I do that movement. So yes, there is a benefit there, but the last question will counter that, means that it may not be the best exercise. And the second question, is it safe, will probably counter that too, because if I look at safety of a leg extension, then I've got some significant challenges with a load at the end of the lever, using a third-class lever in leg extension, causing shearing forces across the knee joint and increasing what we call patellofemoral forces of the patella coming up against the condyle of the femur, which is the number one injury in the knee, called patellofemoral compression challenges with the knee. I'll cover that as a separate one. So when you look at its benefit, sometimes the answer is no, it doesn't. There's no benefit at all, because I want to burn fat and you've got me building muscle, or I want to get cardiovascular fit and you've got me doing some weird, mimicking some animal pose on the ground. Well, that's not going to get me fit. It's good if I'm an animal, whatever that might be. So use your common sense from an anatomical and a physiological point of view. What energy system is it in? Is it in the phosphate, is it in the lactate, or is it in the aerobic? And what is the long-term effect of that, and will that meet your goal or the benefit that you want? And that benefit goes back to that first question of why you're doing that. What do you want to get out of it? And that really questions that, and you have to look at that from an anatomical and a physiological point of view. Physiological if it's burning fat or building muscle, anatomical if you're working a particular muscle for a particular reason. And the last question is probably overall the best question is there a better exercise? Is there a better way to do this? Is there a more effective way that gives me greater results? So if I use crunches, does it burn fat? No. What's there a better way to burn fat? We'll hop on the treadmill and actually work the cardiovascular system to burn fat. That's going to be a better exercise if you want to burn fat. If I look at building muscle in my quadricep, doing a leg extension, what would be a better exercise? Well, probably doing squats, because squats are going to activate more the quadriceps, because it's a bigger, more compound exercise, happens to be more functional and safer as well. So there is a better choice of exercises. So they're the questions. Number one, why? Why means what is the goal, then what do they want to get out of it, and why? The second question, is it safe from an anatomical point of view? Number three, is it functional or specific to the outcome? Yes, or is it just completely unrelated to the human movement in how I live or how I perform, whether it be for life, whether it be occupation, or whether it be in sport? I see a lot of sports people do exercises that they have no relation to the sport, but because that's the new trendy sports exercise, everyone's doing it, where you say, well, maybe there's better things you can actually do with your time because we live in a time-starved world. The next one is there a benefit? Does it provide the result that you're after? Does it burn fat? Does it build muscle? Does it increase power? Does it increase stability? Does it improve function? And the last one is the item one, is there a better exercise? Because if you can do a better exercise, why do a sub-better exercise? Why do a substandard one? You can do a better one, get greater return in your training time and energy. So let's have a look at a few, and I go through some, and we'll look at it from an anatomical point of view, common sense. Now, a trendy one now is swinging weights. Yes, now, if I shared this with Dr. Bronx back in the 80s, I think it was 1983, I first went to university, he would be rolling in his grave right now if he's in his grave. So if I grab a weight, for example, whether it be one arm or two arm or different variations, and I'm using a light weight here, and I start to do things such as this, where I swing, and they're quite popular. Off they come. Now, just from a common sense point of view, if you've never seen that exercise before, does it look safe with a load and swinging a weight above your head? Let me ask you this. I'll use another common sense question. If you were got a job as a tiler, you are a labourer in a building company, and your job was to do this. There was a 2-story house, and you had to get tiles, roofing tiles, and your job was to pick up the roofing tile, and you had to grab the roofing tile and swing and throw the tile up to the second level where someone caught it, and they put the tile down. And your job was to grab the tile and swing and throw the... How long do you think that your business would be open for when the occupational health and safety people come and investigate safety in the workplace? I reckon you'd last about a millisecond before they shut that movement down, because they'll look at that and say that is just a dangerous movement pattern to be done in an occupation of any occupation. If you worked in a factory and your job is to get boxes and throw them above your head, you'd be shut down immediately. Particularly in New Zealand, because we have very, very strict and very hard occupational health and safety law. But in the gym, hey, it's okay. We can do it in the gym because we don't call it that, we call it whatever fancy name you want to call it. So from a common sense point of view, from the outside you think, okay, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Yes, it's a hard movement, but standing on my head and spinning on my head's a hard movement. It's going to destroy my neck. But I say, yeah, but it takes a lot of energy and balance to do it. Yeah, that's great if you're a rap dancer, but why do I do that for? So from a overall point of view, it sort of looks a little bit, inappropriate. No, it doesn't look like anything I do in life. It doesn't look like anything. It doesn't look like we burn fat. It doesn't look like we build muscle. It tries to cover everything, and overall, it probably doesn't look very safe. From a safety point of view, it's a second question. If you look at where do we start? First of all, if I start low here, yes, I'm using my legs and I'm flexing, and now straight away I'm flexing through my lower back. So I'm putting my lower back into flex position. I've actually got anterior compression on the inner vertebral disc in my L4, L5, and it's okay to do that, by the way. You know, the body's designed to do that to pick things up, but is it designed to do that repetitively with a load regularly throughout the week? Then that could be the challenge. So straight away, if you do that movement and I start swinging with a momentum weight, and that's going through my spine, that creates the axis of rotation on my L4, L5, which is the main prime joint that experiences deterioration. 80% of people get lower back pain, and many times it's very similar to the reason why they got it. Then from an anatomical point of view, if I get my goggles and I look at what's happening to that vertebrae as you're doing this, swinging away, straight away I'll probably say that's not really an exercise that's going to be conducive, because it's not compression. It's actually you're impinging on the anterior part of the inner vertebral disc, pushing the disc towards the back on a repetitive nature, doing a trendy exercise that everyone sees as fashionable now. And that's fine if you want to do it, but if you pass that on to your clients, then from an integrity point of view, you have to take responsibility that you could actually be setting them up for significant lower back challenges. I know if Rory did that, she would last about 2 reps, because she's already got a significantly herniated, deteriorated disc in the lower back. So from the lower back point of view, if you say, is that safe? Well, probably that's not very safe movement. If I use bringing my shoulders up with a long lever, third class lever, loaded in the lever, swinging it up, then stopping it, then that's putting my shoulder into impingement. What's the number one injury in the shoulder joint? Shoulder impingement, where I impinge the tendon, the supraspinatus, between the head of the humerus and the acromion process. And if I get more impingement, particularly when I go to the anterior part, where the acromion process is more prominent. So from the shoulder point of view, I'm also get possible impingement. So from a safety point of view, it's a very hard one to justify if I was an orthopedic surgeon or if I was a chiropractor who specialises in this area. So from safety, it wouldn't add up. If we go to the next one, function. What part of life do you grab a weight and you have to swing it repetitively like this? What part of life do you need to do that? What even sport does that? Maybe there might be an event in one of the strongman competitions I've seen before. They get barrels and they throw the barrel over the... But that's a specific reason they do that, and the guys are bigger than mountains anyway. But for the general population, to do a high stress, dysfunction type movement like that is a very hard one to justify if you're looking at it from an anatomical and a biomechanical and a logical point of view. So from a function point of view, very hard one. I can't imagine where I've actually done that movement before in all my sports that I've done. Then you look at the benefit. Well, people say, oh, it's great for, what's it great for? Let's have a look at cardiovascular. Is there a cardiovascular? Do you do that for 10, 15 minutes? It's not really cardiovascular. So it's not going to be, is there a better choice for cardiovascular? Of course there is. A less complicated movement, a higher expression of energy expenditure, more effort in a more simple type movement pattern, rather than trying to control this weight in your hands, between your legs and over your head. If you have a look at it it's great for strength. Well, let's have a look at strength point of view. If I was going to do this exercise, I think to myself, and I use me as an example, what weight would I be able to comfortably use? Well, if we're looking at strength, it might be a leg exercise. Okay, so I reckon I could probably do about 20 kilograms, relatively safely in terms of not really hurting myself instantly. I'll hurt myself over a period of time due to the repetitive nature of the exercise. But if I grab 20 kilos, I could probably do 20 kilos. This kettlebell is 28 kilos. I certainly couldn't do that. My joints would fall off. But if I say 20 kilos, maybe 10 kilo, 10, 20 kilo, 20 kilos a push. So, and I'm training my legs. Now, if you look at a corresponding exercise of what I train my legs, if I do, say, a barbell squat, what weight could I lift doing a barbell squat? Well, I can quite comfortably, in this controlled movement, do a barbell squat of about 100 kilo. And I can express maximum force with good form, compression forces through my body, doing a 100 kilo squat. But on this swinging weight, I can only use 20 kilo due to the biomechanics of the movement, the long lever movement, the awkwardness of the movement, and trying to control the movement. So therefore, this movement will apply 20 kilos of load to my legs, where if I just do a squat, would apply 100 kilo, 5 times the force, 5 times the muscle activation. So if I had a choice, if I wanted to build strength in my legs, would I pick an exercise that 100 kilo or an exercise would only activate 20% due to the complexity of the movement? So from a leg strengthening exercise, it's a very poor exercise because it only activates 20% due to complexity of the movement. Therefore, I'd be better off doing a squat if I wanted strength. What this tries to do is it tries to give you cardiovascular and strength at the same time. Well, that's like saying I want to head north and south at the same time. They're completely different energy systems. You can't have both. You're either going to work one brilliantly or the other one brilliantly, or try to put them all together and do them all poorly. because you can't blend them all together in one if you want to get the best results from your training. So from the question is there a better exercise? Well, if your goal is to get fitter, cardiovascular, and increase your cardiovascular fitness, is there a better exercise than doing weighted swings? Of course there is. Go and hop on a treadmill and really get your heart rate up as close to that 220 minus your age, because you can't do that here because you're trying to deal with the complexity of the lift. If my goal is to build muscle and power and strength, then I'll be better off going and doing a squat and really focusing on muscle activation of these, rather than try to bring them all together and do a very poor job of both in the one movement pattern. But hey, it's a very fashionable, it's a very trendy movement. And these days, with not just people doing things like, I'm doing lift and push and down. And if you just start applying those steps of, first of all, does this make any sense or swing it right up to your head and back down? Is it functional? Is it, more importantly, is it safe? I think if you've got your goggles on, yes, they're all functional movements and they all may be based on elite sporting movements, and they may be justifiable if you're an Olympic lifter, but to take that movement pattern and get the general public doing those types of movements with a body that's not designed for that level. For example, we saw me getting Michael Schumacher, the great Formula 1 racer, and telling me how to drive my car the way he drives his Formula 1 Ferrari. If I drove my car with my driving skill, with my car, the way he drove with his driving skill, his high performance car, if I drove my car the same way, it would just fall apart, because that's a whole different category. And what to try to take this into this, is this going to end up long-term disastrous? If you have a look at maybe another exercise, which is one of the traditional one, crunches. People are still laying on the ground doing crunches. So if I lay on my back and I'm doing my crunches with my feet in the air or on a bench or on the ground, I don't know how that affects anything, by the way, where your feet are. So if you look at first of all, if you look at common sense, if you look at it from what are you trying to do here? Are you trying to burn fat, build muscle? Are you trying to get a flat tummy? And if you look at that movement, if you're not emotionally attached to it, and you look at it and says, does that make any common sense? Does that actually look right? Or 5 million people laying on the ground doing that movement pattern, does that make it right? So if you use it, look at common sense, does it burn fat? Does it build muscle? Is it functional? First of all, it just looks a bit weird, but it looks so acceptable because we all do it. But just because we all do it doesn't mean it's right. And I used to do them, heaps when I was younger. Obviously, I haven't done them for decades now because I know better. So the next one is it safe? Well, if you look at the pattern, you're in this back flat position and you're going into this, and the big challenge of occupational health and safety these days is poor sitting habits. We all sit in this rounded position on the computer. So my pelvis is anterior tilted, my back is flattened, my thoracic spine is thoracic, is in kyphotic position, my shoulders are rounded, my head's poked, and I'm in this position. And that is the number one contributor to lower back pain, because my position is supposed to be here, not here. But what does crunch put you in there? Crunch actually promotes that poor postural position by rolling and flexing the spine in a repetitive nature. And remember, when you flex the spine, you're also causing anterior compression of your intervertebral disc in your lumbar spine, particularly L4, L5 and L5, S1. So you're doing this repetitive nature. And I use Rory as an example. She would never do crunches because they actually aggravate her back, because she's already got a deteriorated disc. Now, yes, it's low forces because there's no heavy weight, but if you do that repetitively, then that may not be good for someone's lower back in the long run. So from a safety, it's not overly dangerous, but it's biomechanically very unsound. You're putting the body in this real ventral position to exercise, where it's supposed to be in this position. So from a functional point of view, from a safety point of view, it's not overly safe, it's not overly dangerous either. From a functional point of view, what part of life do you get in this little rounded position and you do that? What part of sport or life or occupation do these muscles work that way? And they don't, because these muscles function to stabilise the pelvis and stabilise the lower back in what position? In the upright position. So laying on the ground where your back is supported by the ground, and then you're using the abs to curl your spine, is not training your body, these muscles, to stabilise your pelvis and the lower back to maintain good pelvic position, which is slightly anterior tilted with a slight lumbar curvature in this nice upright position. It's actually not conducive in any way to function. It's completely dysfunctional movement. First of all, you're laying on the ground training a group of muscles that function in the upright position. So while you train a group of muscles in a completely different body position to the way they actually function. It's like me being a fighter or a boxer, laying on the ground and doing all my sparring, laying on my back, punching the ceiling. Well, that's not how I fight. I fight in the upright position. It's like if a footballer lay on the ground and start kicking the ball laying on the ground. That would be really silly, because that's not how you work similar muscles, but it's certainly not the way they're designed to work in the real life situation. So from a functional point of view, very hard one to justify that one. Now, you may come up with an extreme argument. Oh yeah, but Kman, how do you get out of bed? Well, you may crunch out of bed, but how many crunches do you do? So if you find yourself arguing from the extreme, then it's generally a very weak argument. So be very careful when you have to go to those extreme levels of justification. And you get that from people who are emotionally attached to the exercise. And if you start doing that, listen to yourself, as I'm being an extremist and I'm just trying to self-justify why I'm doing what I'm doing, which I've probably done it for 30 years, therefore I really believe in it. Not because it's right, but because that's what I've always done. Then you look at the next one is there a benefit? Well, doing crunches, does that burn fat? Well, obviously not. If that was the case, then I could crunch on one side, not the other, and fat would come off one side and not the other. I could crunch my chin and I could get fat off my chin. I could do this to my arm and fat would come off my arm. So there's no such thing as spot reduction. Crunches don't burn much energy. It's a low energy expenditure type activity. It's very concentrated, where you burn a bit of lactic acid, or you use glycogen in the rectus abdominis, and you do these little ones and you get the byproduct of lactic acid by burning glycogen anaerobically, which we call anaerobic glycolysis, and the metabolic byproduct of that is lactic acid, because it's a small muscle and we keep it compressed in that little isometric type pulsating movement that builds up because you can't flush it out, pushes up against the nerve endings, and we get that sensation of pain or burn, which we misinterpret as exploding fat cells or building muscle, which is not the case when you know your physiology. So it doesn't burn fat, and does it build muscle? Well, what exercise in the gym do you go and do hundreds of repetitions of? Well, probably none, because you know that if I go on the bench press and do hundreds of repetitions on a light weight repetitively, it's not going to build muscle. So why do you think crunches will actually build muscle by doing dozens and dozens and dozens of crunches in a dysfunctional movement that can be unsafe? Well, you're not going to build muscle because there's no real significant overload. And even if there is, the load's applied in a poor angle anyway. If I put a weight on my chest, then I'm putting load across my spine. It's just going across the spine. So there's no real benefit, significant benefit from a muscle building point of view, from a physiological point of view, because you need to use weights which are 80% of MVC, maximal voluntary contraction, means maximal force generation, at least 80% if you want to really activate muscle activation to a significant level. Is going to promote strength and hypertrophy, and it's certainly not going to burn a lot of fat, because your heart rate doesn't even get up to a higher levels to cardiovascular effect. Is there a better use of your time? Is there a better exercise? Of course. You want to burn fat? Hop on the treadmill or do something uses your whole body to burn energy, get your heart rate up, whether it be cardiovascular, aerobic or interval type training. On the other hand, if you want to build muscle, what muscles, exercises work these? Doing heavy squats, heavy lunges is going to work all these muscles in a functional, safe, applicable, specific way that's going to not just build muscle of your big muscles, but also your stabilizers. So you look at crunches, again, a common exercise. If you move on to other exercises, I use planks. That's quite a popular one now. I'll use the bench here, I'll go all the way down. And these are just recent, and you get there and say, okay, let's hold that position and hold there and hold there. And that becomes hard over a period of time, as standing on my head becomes hard over a period of time. But that doesn't mean it's the right hard. For example, if I look at that exercise, first of all, if you look at it from an unemotional point of view, and you see someone over there and it looks like they're imitating a frozen lizard and they're not moving and they're creating this bridge, you say, okay, what are they doing? I mean, if you've never seen it before, I remember the first time I saw planks, I thought, what is everyone doing? Well, what is that? Because I'd never seen it before. I've been doing this for 37 years, and when it came, it's all acceptable now. It's actually quite trendy to do planks. But when it first came out, it looked kind of weird, but because everyone started doing it, it became acceptable. But it never actually made any sense to me, because it looks kind of weird in its own unique way. I'm going to get down and try to build a bridge, or I'm going to imitate a lizard, or whatever it might be. So from that, it may not make a lot of common sense. Number two, from a safety point of view, well, look, most people do them poorly, so their back sags. And remember the load, yes, you have your 2 points on the ground, and the maximal load goes through the middle. It's like a bridge. You have the bridge there, the maximal load just goes through the middle. And that goes straight across, so the load goes across your vertebrae, or across your spine. And unless you've got really good, strong muscles to support that, you find that, a lot of people will start to get a bit of pain in the lower back by doing that exercise, because the load's not going through the vertebral column, the load's going across the vertebral column, which is a shearing force. So you're trying to strengthen these muscles by applying a shearing force, which doesn't make a lot of sense, because the body is in the upright position. Which comes to the second point, is it functional? What part of life do you lay in the ground and hold your position? Your position and function is the upright position, so you need to work these muscles in the upright position with the pelvis in a slight anterior tilted position with a natural lumbar spine. But when most people do planks, their pelvis is in the wrong position, their lumbar spine's in the wrong position, and they're holding on tightly, trying to hold all this to withstand the shearing forces. That actually sends the wrong neural pathways to the muscles to control those muscles and those joints, where you're better off probably doing a more upright type position, the way the body is designed. So if you wanted to perform the upright position, train it in the upright position while you lay on the ground and do a plank, which is in the wrong body position. There's static, where life is dynamic, it's causing shearing forces, and it's quite uncomfortable for most people. Is it hard? Yeah, and people have these competitions. How long can you hold your plank? Well, that's like me saying, how long can I stand on my head? Well, it's hard, but it's not really, if you saw me in the gym and I had a weight up like this, and I'm just holding it there, you'd probably say, what are you doing? It says, I'm doing an arm plank. Great for the shoulder stability. You think that's a silly exercise. Now I actually start feel shearing forces through my shoulder joint already. Or if I'm in the gym and I'm standing in the corner and I'm doing this, and my legs are stuck up in the air, and I'm just doing this, you say, what are you doing? He says, I'm doing a leg plank. This is great for stability of my hip joint. Or I'm doing, it's not, you don't see people doing arm planks and leg planks because they're silly. So why is a abdominal plank all of a sudden great? You don't see me in the gym doing this. So what are you doing? I'm doing neck crunches to burn the fat off my neck. Well, that would be silly. But you see a lot of people doing that. Why isn't that just as silly? I'm doing this with my ankle, and you say, what are you doing? I'm doing ankle crunches because I've got fat ankles. And I need to build up the strength of my ankles. I need to build up my strength in the ankles and get rid of the fat. So I'm just going to do, with no weight, I'm just going to do this, ankle crunches. That would be silly. They'd probably kick me out of the gym. But it's okay in an emotional spot, because this is our emotional spot, to do crunches. As planks are now emotional, because so many people are doing them, and they hang their ego on it, and their vanity on it, and their expertise on it, and how dare you say they're bad because they're so good. But try to justify them. Pretty hard way to do. So, is there a benefit? Does it burn fat? No, it's not a fat burning activity. It doesn't expend a lot of energy. Does it build muscle? Well, not really, because if you can hold anything for more than, say, 10 seconds, then it's not building muscle. All you're doing is building endurance. And if you're holding a plank for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes, then that's definitely way down the energy timeline, way down here into the lactate system, even into the passive aerobic system, and it's also using slow twitch muscle fibers, because you're holding it for long periods of time. So if you understand your energy systems, phosphate, anaerobic, aerobic, then you say, well, where's it sit in the energy timeline? It doesn't make any sense for the proclaimed reasoning of why people do it. Is there a better exercise? Of course there is. Go and do some deadlifts, do some lunges, do some push-ups. Push-ups, that's a moving plank. At least push-ups are a moving plank, or dips. If you look at I've already covered some already, anything which is like a straight arm raises, side raises, front raises, First of all, why do people do them? They'll probably say, I want to build my deltoids, or I want to tone my arms, or I want to get striations in the arms, whatever it might be. Yeah, it's a movement. It doesn't look as silly, but it does look silly, a little bit silly, because I don't see people going around the streets like this. I'm not a bird. That's not how I function. Is it safe? Well, first of all, if there's a load at the end of the lever with a long lever and a third-class lever and carrying higher inertial forces, then you're going to get lots of forces going through your axis of rotation, because the load's there, the forces, the resistance there, your muscle forces there, and your axis are there, which is a weak position for the joint. So you may find over time that's going to create a bit of stress, shearing forces across the shoulder joints. So any straight arm movement like this is going to create shearing forces. The longer the lever, the heavier the load, the greater the shearing force. That's just biomechanics, that's just anatomy. If you look at function, well, it's not really functional, because not many parts of life do you do that, unless you're a bird, doing this. So it's not really function, you wouldn't do it for function. I know a lot of bodybuilders do it because they want to isolate those deltoids. Is there a benefit? Does it work the deltoids? Yes, it does work the deltoids, of course it does. But remember, it's also could be deteriorating the joint. And the last question, is there a better choice? So if I do my deltoids work in more close range, high strength type movement patterns, such as bench presses and rows, yeah, my deltoids work because they're an assistant mover. So you get plenty of deltoid work in all these big exercises, rather than trying to isolate the little muscles that also isolate the stresses across the joints that are associated with those little muscles, particularly when you've got these long, unstable type movement patterns. So legs, any someone raises a big question, and ultimately is there a safer, better, more time efficient way to do it? I talked about leg extensions. I only got a couple more to go. Leg extensions where you're sitting down. First of all, if you look at it, first of it's on a machine. So we don't live our life on a machine unless you're a Robocop. But first of all, in itself, it looks a bit weird. We're just doing this movement. If you're an alien looking at it, you go, wow, that looks a bit weird. To us, it's common because we accept it. But you don't question it. You don't question what you accept. But maybe you should start questioning it, and you may unaccept it. So leg extensions, from a safety point of view, the big challenge with leg extensions, again, third class lever in the knee joint. You have a load at the distal end of the tibia. You're in this position where you're extending it up. You're in this sitting position where you've got this posterior tilt of your pelvis, flat back, kyphotic, poke neck, hip flexed, knee flexed, and lifting a load. So from a function point of view, it's not very functional, and it's very isolated. What you're doing there in that movement is you're creating a bit of shearing forces across the knee joint between the tibia and the femur, because the quadricep pulls on the tibia and pulls it forward on the femur. So you get this slight gliding effect because your hamstrings aren't co-activated, because your hamstrings are passive in the sitting position. Therefore your agonist dominates with the co-activation of the antagonist, whose role is to stabilise the joint so your agonist can move the joint safely without causing damage to the joint. But when you isolate things, you tend to put things out of whack. And you also, because of the line of pull, your quadriceps pulling this way, and your load is also that way down here, it pulls your patella up against the femur, increasing patellofemoral compression forces between the patella and the femur, and that could cause wear and tear. And the number one injury in the knee joint is Patellofemoral Syndrome, where the patella particularly starts to rub up against the lateral condyle of the femur. So you've got shearing forces between the femur and the tibia, and increased patellofemoral forces between the patella and the femur. So you've got these two-dimensional type of stresses occurring across the knee joint. So from a justification, as soon as I learned all this, I just dumped it out of my repertoire, and that was back in the early 90s when I first started to question all of these things. Is there a benefit? Well, from a safety, is it functional? What part of life do you do this in the sitting position? Well, there's not many parts of life. And you may say, hey, yes, maybe it's kicking a ball or a karate kick. Well, now you're really taking it to an extreme form of justification, because kicking a ball and martial art kicks don't come from the knee joint. They come from the hip joint, and the leg is just the end whipping motion of the kick. So I won't even open up that Pandora's box. So is there a benefit? Yes, it does work the quadricep, but the challenge is you're compromising the knee joint, and it's not very functional. Is there a better exercise? Yeah, doing squats, doing lunges that work the quadricep or the quadricep, plus all the hamstring, plus the glutes, plus the lower leg, the calves, while controlling the knee joint, controlling those two articulating surfaces by co-activation of your agonists, your antagonists, and your stabilizers and your synergistic muscles to keep that joint nice and secure while you do a lift in a functional compression type movement where you can actually lift a heavier weight that creates more force on the muscle, that creates more muscle activation. And EMG research has shown that, electromyographical research has shown you get more muscle activation doing squats than you do doing leg extensions when they actually plug them up to electrodes. So the leg extension, that's how you go through the analysis of the leg extension. If you look at maybe shoulder, I do two more to finish off. Shoulder presses, anything above the head, straight away, I just feel pain straight away. Don't want to do up here again. Any movement up here, we're designed to take our hands up here, but not to lift heavy loads up here. If we're going to lift logs to build log cabins back in the day, we don't put the logs above our head. We carry the logs down here, we keep it close. We don't, this is up for just nailing stuff. This is long lever stuff. So this joint is a very mobile joint, the glenohumeral joint. It's made for mobility, not stability. Mobility means light loads with lots of versatility, lots of movement. So it's very, very applicable. Stability means I've got a core base and I can lift heavy loads. This joint is not a weight-bearing joint. So to start to lift weight-bearing weights on it, on a joint designed for mobility, because it's a ball and socket joint, then, and it's a shallow joint to allow that mobility, then you'll start to play with the wear and tear in that joint. And if I start pressing up here, hands out here, I take my arm to abduction, lateral rotation, and that's now what we call shoulder, not just shoulder impingement, but also dislocation position. So it's a very unstable position. So just be very wary of the justification of lifting weight above your head. First of all, it's not really right to lift heavy weights, and we know in the workplace health and safety, in occupations or factories, you are not allowed, it's against the law to ask your employees to take a weight, a box or any form, and lift it above a certain height, because that's dangerous for their shoulders and also their lower back. We already know that from workplace health and safety. So why is it now okay to do that to your personal training clients? Well, maybe you should join those two dots, a little light bulb go off and go, well, why is it? Well, maybe it's not safe there. We just call it something different. Yeah, this is a great shoulder bulking exercise. Well, this is a great shoulder destroying exercise, a shoulder joint destroying exercise. So from a function point of view, you don't lift heavy weight up here. From a safety point of view, you've got a safety issue up here as well, particularly in the repetitive nature, considering the number one injury in the shoulder joint is shoulder impingement, tendonitis will be supraspinatus and tendinopathy, which I am suffering from both. Then you have a look at, is there a benefit? Yeah, it works the deltoids, but the challenge is it's already been compromised with the first two, safety and function. Is there a better exercise? Of course. Then if you want to load these muscles up, then load them up in a good safe position, close to the torso, pulling or pushing this way. You're still going to get plenty of deltoid activation in here, but you also get lots of co-activation of all the associated muscles to stabilise that joint in a secure, stable position to lift a good weight that activates everything in a holistic way, because things don't work in an isolation way. So that's looking at shoulder presses. If I go and look at, what's another fancy one floating around, I'll finish off with this one. You see a lot of the people want to get perchy little bottoms or big bottoms. The hip thrusts, you may have seen this one where they lay down on a bench. And first of all, just looking at this, it looks a bit weird. They put a weight on their hips and they start to do all this stuff with a barbell, and they do all sorts of exercises, all weird positions. If someone gets in a weird position, it's probably pretty weird. Well, I think they call them hip thrusts. So first of all, if you put your logical common sense eyes on and saw someone doing that, you probably say, what are they doing? That looks a bit weird. And there's lots of weird exercises out there. And that's what's important to be able to use a system to break it down to come out with the right answers that are justifiable, not just emotionally driven by proclaimed outcomes. So if it looks weird, it probably is weird. So what do? They're trying to burn fat, they're trying to build muscle. Are they trying a new sexual position to get better in the bedroom? I don't know. That's what it looks like. So that's probably, I don't know, it's a bit weird. So that's the first. First of all, the other one is, the next one is safety. Well, it looks a bit weird. I found it quite awkward. You're putting a weight across your pelvis, and therefore you're creating a shearing force across your vertebral column or your spine, because the weight is not going through the joint, it's going across the body. So remember, anything that goes across, like an axe through wood, it will actually cause more damage than if it went in compression. Or sandpaper across, cause wear and tear. Sandpaper pushing, no wear and tear. So straight away you've got a load that's perpendicular to the movement. So if a load's perpendicular to the movement, you're going to create some form of shearing force across the lower back area. From a functional point of view, well, what part of life do you do that movement? And there's lots of variations of that movement. They do it on balls of air, they do it upside down, they do it from the ceiling, they do all sorts of stuff. So how is that functional in daily life's activity? And that's a very hard one to question. You know, they want to do it for burning fat or get a big bum or get a tight bum, whatever it might be. So from a safety, doesn't measure up. Function definitely doesn't measure up. Is there a benefit? Well, does it work the glutes? Well, yeah, of course it does work the glutes. It works the glutes in a less safe position, in a very dysfunctional way, but it does get some glute activation because you're actually extending the hips. But how much weight can you put on? The glutes are the biggest, strongest muscles in the body, so they're very powerful muscles. So how much can you actually load it, the glutes, with the weight going across the spine is a question. If you're only using light weight, then you're really underusing the glutes anyway, because the glutes are a powerful muscle, but they've got little 5 kilo, 10 kilo weights. Well, just carrying your own body weight doing a squat carries 60, 70, 80 kilograms just by doing a squat. You're actually getting probably more muscle activation getting down into the position than what you do when you're actually executing the exercise. So from a benefit point of view, well, it doesn't burn fat, as we know. It probably gets a little bit of muscle activation in the glutes, just to hold that position. And you do it for long enough that maybe you put some rubber bands around your legs. They're all retraining now. So they put rubber bands in, those rubber bands. Well, where's the resistance? The resistance going that way. It's not going through the glutes. You're holding it out. So you're using your abductors, not necessarily glutes. So yeah, they add all these dimensions to the exercise to make it more overcomplicated, which many times makes it less and less effective. The more complicated the movement, the less effective it is. If I want to get fit cardiovascular and I start, if I hop on a treadmill and I just focus on speed with a good gait or good running and I run faster and faster, then I'm going to get a great result. But if I start, running like this, where I can't focus on the speed or the effort because I'm so busy focusing on the complication of the movement, then the speed's going to be compromised because the complication of the movement that takes away from the effectiveness of the exercise. Yes, it's more complicated, it's fancy, probably looks weird, it can be fashionable, but it has a less result because of it. I see that with lots of weights. They do dumbbells and they take them up and they rotate them and bring them out and bring them back down and all sorts of stuff. Again, you're just making something very simple, very, very complicated, which takes away from the effectiveness of the exercise. Is there a better exercise than doing the hip thrust? Well, you're doing your hip thrust, doing squats and lunges. No, we go back to those exercises, but they're functional, good core-based exercises and applied to the basic biomechanics of the body, rather than putting the body in an unfunctional position, doing an unfunctional movement with an unfunctional load through an unfunctional angle. And talking about complication, you will see people who will grab a dumbbell like this and just up, pull, push, down, down, up, down, push. And with the one weight. But understanding you're actually using the legs, which are a very powerful group of muscles. And then you're using the arms. So the maximal weight you can use will be dependent upon the weakest joint. And the weakest joint is this. So I might be able to get 10 kilo above my head, but 10 kilo in a squatting action would do virtually nothing for my legs. Particularly when I can squat 100 kilo, and now I'm putting a 10 kilo to try to add the same weight with different muscles that have different capacities of force generation. So you're only going to be able to work the muscles that are the weakest, and all the other muscles are going to be short-changed because they're not being loaded to their capability. And I also will see people will grab a weight like this and they'll do a squat. Now the amount of weight I can lift is dependent upon how much my arms can hold the weight. And I'm training these. These muscles are powerful, but the weight is going to be determined by how much I can hold with my deltoids. And that's why we do weights with the weights here, close to your center of gravity, your midline, and we try to keep them so I can lift the heaviest weight to maximise my legs, or I put the barbell on my back if I'm strong enough to do that with good stability, so the weight is directly down the spine into the legs so I can lift the maximal weight. But if I put the weight here, whether it be with a medicine ball or a kettlebell or whatever it might be, then I can't lift as much weight because my shoulders aren't going to be as strong as my legs. I'll be better off if I'm going to use a heavier kettlebell and put the weight through my midline this way, rather than have a kettlebell here, which means my delta is going to burn out. Or get a light kettlebell and swing it, because now the weight's determined by my shoulder strength. Where here, it's not determined by my shoulder strength, because my shoulder is actually in that static position in my midline. So I guess what I'm challenging you is I've been challenged in the past, and the best way to challenge is to challenge yourself. Don't wait for me to challenge you, but challenge yourself and ask yourself, if I'm going to do this exercise, let me go through those steps. Number one, what is the goal of the exercise and why am I doing it? And does it pass the common sense? If I was an alien or I've never seen that exercise before in my life, it's not socially acceptable, it's not even, the influencers aren't doing it, would I look at that and go, wow, what a great idea, that looks like a fantastic exercise, of course that's going to give me that. Or when you go, that looks a bit strange. But the more you look at a strange thing, the less strange it comes across, particularly if you start doing it. Question number two, your x-ray goggles, what does it do to Herbie? What does it do to my joints? Because these are things you're going to have to live with when you get to your 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s. I'm sure Alan can vouch for that, because it's mostly his joints that are wearing out, not his muscles. Next question, is it functional? Is it relatable in its body position, in its joint action, in its movement pattern, in its levers, is in its speed, on line of resistance or line of force? Is it relatable to the outcome I want from a functional point of view, whether it be function for life, function for occupation, or function for sport? And I know sport may be a little bit more, you may push the boundaries more in sport because you have to perform at the extreme level. The next question, is there a physiological benefit? Does it build muscle according to the motor units being recruited and the force being generated? Does it activate my fast twitch or slow twitch muscle fibers? Where in the energy system is this exercise lay? Is it going to be more for phosphate, for strength and power and muscle size? Is it going to be lactate for more endurance? Or is it going to be more aerobic? And where does it fit on that line when it comes to benefit? And does it work the muscles that it says it's going to work, and does it work them in the way that's going to be conducive to building muscle, increasing strength, increasing speed, increasing power, increasing cardiovascular fitness, changing respiratory quotient, increasing MVO2, or expending energy or burning fat? And you have to have your good knowledge of your anatomy and physiology to be able to work out the right answer. Common sense will give you the right answer, by the way. And then the last question is there a better use of my time? Can I do that more effectively and get a greater return for my training effort by doing a separate exercises or a different type of program? And if you ask those questions and you answer them honestly and you can justify them, then you'll find that you'll be on the right path to find the right way and the best way. And there's always going to be a better way. That's why we always continue our journey of learning and asking questions. And I'm always doing that to this day. If you were coached by me back in the 90s to the 2000s, or even the 80s to the 90s to the 2000s to the 2010s to 2020s, you'd see that I've evolved a lot in my views because I'm continually questioning myself, and I'm never right, I'm just less wrong than I was yesterday. It means I'm always wrong because I'm always seeking a better way. If you take on the Ferrari principle, we are the best because we know we can always get better. If you do that, then your career as an exercise professional, you'll be leading the pack. But you'll be leading the pack in such a way you won't even be in a pack, because the pack will eventually, they just go off where the pack goes. But you're going to stay true to your course based, making your decisions on integrity, following your moral compass, abiding by your values, and just doing the right thing because you're an exercise professional.